You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 6th of February 2015. Thought for the day, the UAF, Islam and the future. Rotherham Council branded not fit for purpose. Tilal Mahdi guilty on 5 charges of sexually exploiting girls in Oxford. 25 men charged with sexual offences against 2 girls in Calderdale. Ukraine crisis, Angela Merkel and François Hollande fly to Russia. Anti-Islam group Pegida is part of Germany, Vice-Chancellor says. Jordan's jets strike Islamic State after pilot's death. Al-Qaeda members' testimony implicating Saudis fuels calls to declassify 9/11 documents. Chad kills 200 Boko Haram militants in Nigeria. Boko Haram hit by 3-nation offensive turns fury on Cameroonian civilians. And finally, 2 for 1 day Friday. UK news. Rotherham Council branded not fit for purpose. Rotherham Council's cabinet is to resign after being branded not fit for purpose and in denial about its shortcomings by an independent government inspection. They will leave their posts as soon as transitional arrangements can be put in place, according to a statement. The political leadership, branded wholly dysfunctional by Communities Secretary Eric Pickles, will be replaced by government commissioners who will be tasked with improving standards at the authority. Early elections will also be held. The inquiry was set up to assess Rotherham's council's ability to handle revelations that 1,400 girls were subjected to sexual abuse over a period of 16 years. It found that, in particular, it is failing in its duties to protect vulnerable children and young people from harm. Louise Casey's report was published as it was claimed a police officer and 2 local politicians have been accused of having sex with underage girls in Rotherham. The Independent Police Complaints Commission would not confirm that it had received an allegation of sexual abuse by a police constable, but said that so far there had been 20 complaints against 10 South Yorkshire officers in relation to their handling of the child sexual exploitation investigation in the South Yorkshire town. The inquiry also endorsed the findings of a previous investigation carried out last year by an expert in child care, Professor Alexis J., and criticised councils for rejecting it. That report made headlines around the world after finding that girls had been beaten by groups of men in Rotherham and in some cases forced to witness the rape of other victims. She wrote, in just over a third of cases, children affected by sexual exploitation were previously known to services because of child protection and neglect. Girls as young as 11 were raped by large numbers of male perpetrators. Most of the men involved were of Pakistani origin. World at 8. Old news and sold news. Now every Tom, Dick and Harry is claiming ignorance of these rapists, and frankly Rotherham is the fag end of it all. It's been common knowledge around Liverpool for the last 40 years, and also common knowledge that the perpetrators are mostly, if not always, Muslims. Another point to remember is that it was the BNP 10 years ago that blew the whistle, not the local councillors, the police or the then incumbent government. National fascists and racists told the truth. Tilal Mahdi guilty on 5 charges of sexually exploiting girls in Oxford. A 36-year-old man was found guilty of 5 charges and not guilty of 3 over allegations he sexually exploited teenage girls in Oxford. Tilal Mahdi of Friar Street, Hereford, denied committing sexual offences against 3 girls. In relation to 1 girl, he was found not guilty of a serious sexual assault, but was found guilty of conspiracy to rape and conspiracy to indecently assault a woman under 16, all from June the 5th, 1996 and June the 4th, 1998. For another girl, he was found guilty of conspiracy to rape, trafficking within the United Kingdom for sexual exploitation, arranging or facilitating child prostitution, and was found not guilty of rape, all from July 17, 2005 to July 16, 2008. He was found not guilty of raping another girl on March 24th, 2006 at the hearing at Oxford Crown Court. He will return to the court for sentencing on March the 6th. World at 8. Deportation for him and his family now. 25 men charged with sexual offences against 2 girls in Calderdale. 25 men have been charged with child sex offences in Calderdale following a major police operation. The men, mainly from Halifax, have been charged with various offences including rape, trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation, sexual activity with a child under 16, sexual assault, voyeurism, sexual grooming, conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with a child under 16, causing a child under 16 to engage in sexual activity without consent, and supply of a Class B drug. The allegations, which date between 2006 and 2011, relate in the main to one girl who was aged under 16 at the time. However, one of the allegations relates to a second victim and occurred in the same time period. All 25 men were charged at Halifax Police Station on Wednesday and have been released on bail. They will appear before Calderdale magistrates on Thursday, February the 12th. The men are Hida Ali, 35, of Nantwich, Cheshire, Mohammed Ramzan, 34, of Bradford, Fasil Mahmood, 35, of Halifax, Zamir Asif, 24, of Halifax, Khalid Zaman, 37, of Bradford, Atif Ali, 32, of Bradford, Mohammed Fiaz Askar, 32, of Bradford, Hassan Pervez, 26, of Halifax, Mansour Akhtar, 23, of Huddersfield, Furqan Ghaffar, 30, of Derby, Aftab Hussain, 35, of Halifax, Talib Sadiq, 29, of Halifax, Amir Ali Dita, 25, of Halifax, Sikandar Malik, 30, of Halifax, Akbar Aziz Hussain, 29, of Halifax, Azim Subani, 23, of Halifax, Tahir Mahmood, 42, of Halifax, Mohammed Ahmed, 41, of Halifax, Aris Ahmed, 31, of Halifax, Tukir Butt, 29, of Halifax, Arshad Majid, 24, of Shipley, Christopher Mulkeen Bennett, 36, of Newport Gwent, Mohammed Asim Janjua, 33, of Bradford, and Haider Ali, 39, of Halifax, and Sikandar Ishaq, 30, of Halifax. World at 8. Somehow I keep hearing Nazir Afzal's voice saying, a small percentage of these crimes are Pakistani Muslims. How's this for a small percentage in this case? Deportation. Why should we have to pay to keep them fed and watered when their relations will still carry on the family businesses of sexual grooming? European news. Ukraine crisis. Angela Merkel and François Hollande to fly to Russia. The leaders of Germany and France fly to Kiev and Moscow with the new Ukraine peace plan as NATO bolsters Eastern Europe against Russia and EU agrees new sanctions. Angela Merkel and François Hollande's peace plan proposes autonomy for pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine in a larger area in return for a ceasefire, according to Germany's Süddeutsche Zeitung newspaper. Justin Hugler reports. The newspaper claims that Merkel and Hollande are in Kiev to get Poroshenko's approval for the plan, and if they succeed they will take it to Moscow for approval. The new peace plan is based on last September's Minsk agreement, the newspaper reports, but recognises territorial gains by the separatists since then. The plan offers a high degree of autonomy for separatist regions, the withdrawal of heavy weapons and a prisoner exchange. The importance of reaching a deal was demonstrated by a dramatic collapse in the Ukraine's hryvnia currency, which lost nearly a third of its value after the central bank halted daily auctions at which it sold hard currency to banks. Nearly bankrupt Kiev is trying to negotiate a bailout from the International Monetary Fund, but many analysts think securing loans is impossible as long as no ceasefire is in place in the war zone in the east. Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk said Kiev would not consider any peace plan that cast doubt on the nation's territorial integrity, sovereignty or independence. World at 8. We all know what happens when France and Germany invade Russia, don't we? Laugh out loud. Anti-Islam group Pegida is part of Germany, Vice-Chancellor says. The anti-Islam group Pegida, whose weekly rallies have brought up to 25,000 onto the streets in the East German city of Dresden, is a part of Germany and should not be ignored, Vice-Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel said in an interview published on Wednesday. Pegida, which stands for Patriotic Europeans Against the Polarisation of the West, rattled the political establishment in Berlin, but now looks set to fade after most of its leaders quit last week due to infighting. However, Gabriel told Stern magazine on Wednesday that politicians must engage with the concerns that the group and its supporters had raised. It's not like these people think differently all of a sudden. They're still driven by anger, fear, insecurity and sometimes hatred of foreigners, said Gabriel, who is also head of the Social Democrats, who are in coalition with Merkel's Conservatives. Asked if Pegida was part of Germany, Gabriel said quite clearly, whether you like it or not, people have a democratic right to be right-wing or nationalist. People also have a right to spread stupid ideas, such as the notion that Germany is being Islamicised. Merkel has warned Germans not to let themselves be manipulated by Pegida and said that some of its leaders have hatred in their hearts. Last month she embraced comments made by former German President Christian Wolff, who triggered a fierce debate in 2010 when he said Islam was a part of Germany. World at 8. Good God, is the woman mad? However, the point is highlighted that if we nationalists were not so bloody minded about each other, great things could have been achieved. Islam is united. And Europe is not. World news. Jordan jets strike Islamic State after pilot's death. Jordan says its warplanes have carried out their first airstrikes on Islamic State targets since the militants released a video showing the killing of a captured Jordanian pilot. On their way back, the planes flew over the village of pilot Moaz al-Kaseba. Their flight coincided with a visit to the village by Jordanian King Abdullah II, who was meeting the pilot's family. The king has vowed to step up the fight against IS. Jordan is part of a US-led coalition bombing the militants. The king gestured to the skies as the warplanes flew overhead, the Associated Press news agency said. Mr Kasesba told mourners that the aircraft were returning from a raid on Syria's Raqqa, the de facto capital of the militant self-declared caliphate, which spans territory in Iraq and Syria. While Jordan did not specify the location of the airstrikes, a security official quoted by Reuters news agency said they had targeted IS in Syria. The response of Jordan and its army after what happened to our dear son will be severe, the king said, after cutting short a trip to the US this week. Jordan is one of 4 Arab states to have taken part in the anti-IS airstrikes in Syria. The other countries are Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. World at 8. Once the Saudi Caliphate turns on ISIS, its days are numbered. Except, of course, that might be what ISIS wants, a split between Muslim states, which makes them weaker and less able to resist the call of Islamic democracy in the form of blatant nihilism. Al-Qaeda's members' testimony implicating Saudi's fueled call to declassify 9/11 documents. Did members of Saudi royal family fund terrorism against the US? Fresh testimony by convicted Al-Qaeda member Zacharias Musai implicating high-level Saudi royals in the 9/11 attacks is fuelling congressional calls to declassify an official report that may point to similar conclusions. 2 lawmakers who spoke with FoxNews.com said they hope the testimony will be a catalyst to make the information public. Reps Walter Jones, RNC, and Stephen Lynch, DMAS, each have seen the 28 classified pages of the full 2002 report and have tried for years to get the US government to release it, arguing Americans have a right to know the full truth. Though he cannot reveal details of a classified government report, Jones suggested Musai's recent testimony in a civil suit filed by families of 9/11 victims was similar to what he saw in the redacted pages. The joint House and Senate report is titled Inquiry into Intelligence Activities Before and After the Terror Attacks. Lynch went so far as to say Musai's information mirrored what he'd read in the classified pages about the Saudis' financial connections to the attacks. Some Saudi connections are already well known, including that 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian citizens, and that Osama bin Laden was the son of a wealthy Saudi Arabian contractor with close ties to the Saudi royal family. World at 8. I'm a firm believer in that several factors were involved in 9/11, the Saudis being just one. All in the plan, my friends, all in the plan. Strange nothing even approaching 9/11 has occurred on British or European soil yet. Chad kills 200 Boko Haram militants in Nigeria. Chad's army killed more than 200 militants from Boko Haram on Tuesday in fighting in northeastern Nigeria, with 9 of its own forces killed, the army and state television said. Chad has deployed 2,500 troops as part of a regional effort to take on the militant group, which has been fighting for 5 years to create an Islamist emirate in northern Nigeria. An estimated 10,000 people died in the region last year. Chad's army destroyed more than a dozen vehicles equipped with heavy weapons and some 100 motorcycles used by the militants in battles in the towns of Gambaru and Nagala the Army High Command said in a statement on Wednesday. There was no independent confirmation of its claim. World at 8. Good. Exhibit the heads for all to see. I like that idea. Boko Haram hit by three-nation offensive turns fury on Cameroonian civilians. Nigerian Islamic extremists on the run from a massive three-nation offensive took revenge Thursday on civilians in neighbouring Cameroon, shooting and burning scores to death and razing mosques and churches. France's president warned that the world is not doing enough to end the wanton killings by Boko Haram. Cameroonian officials said that more than 500 wounded people are trapped in the town of Fotokol, where fighting began Wednesday and continued Thursday. They said Boko Haram fighters are using civilians as shields. While Boko Haram had previously carried out attacks in Cameroon, the latest bloodshed comes after the group warned other nations against uniting against it and appears to be a direct result of Cameroon and Chad launching an offensive this week with aircraft and ground troops. This new military involvement by other African nations in counter-insurgency campaigns in Nigeria stands to grow even bigger. African Union officials met there on Thursday to finalise details for a multinational force to attack Boko Haram, though deployment could be delayed by funding issues. African leaders last week authorised a 7,500-strong force to fight Boko Haram, with pledges for a battalion each from Nigeria and its four neighbours Cameroon, Chad, Niger and Benin. We consider Boko Haram to be a cancer, and if the international community does not focus its mind on this disease, it will spread not only in Central Africa but other regions all over the continent. Cameroon's Information Minister Issa Chiroma Bakari said Thursday at the beginning of the three-day meeting in Yaoundé, Cameroon's capital. Officials from the United States, France, Russia, Britain and the European Union are attending, along with senior officials from the United Nations Peacekeeping Department. World at 8. Now shall we all have a bet that the UN or the world does absolutely nothing about this? Thought for the day: the UAF, Islam and the future. One of my nationalist pals sent me the lowdown on the UAF, and I know it may well be old, but it is the first time I've seen it. I was shocked, really shocked at what it contained. I'd always thought of them as a bunch of dirty commie losers, and I was surprised to see they're quite a lot of high-profile dirty commie losers, which I didn't know about. I'll just read a few of the supporting pillars of this far-spread and very well-funded communist and lovey-ridden gaggle of oddities. Signatories to the UAF founding statement include Ken Livingstone, Tony Benn, Peter Hain, MP, David Hanson, MP, Adam Price, MP, Barbara Follett, MP, Diane Abbott, MP, John Cryer, MP, John Trickett, MP, Keith Vaz, MP, Peter Bottomley, MP, Alice Mahone, MP, Alan Meale, MP, Ian Gibson, MP, Sir Teddy Taylor, MP, Harry Cohen, MP, Petty Williams, MP, Ken Purchase, MP. Take these are all MPs. Laura Moffat, Peter Bradley, Vera Baird, Bill Hetherington, Edward Garnier, Roger Berry, Angela Smith, Brian Iden, Anthony Sheen, Anthony Steen, Colin Pickall, Clive Betts, Janet Anderson, Neil Gerard, Jane Griffiths, Brian Donahue, Helen Clark, Terry Davis, Janet Dean, Adrian Bailey, David Cameron, British Prime Minister, Louise Ellman, Eric Ilsley, Kelvin Hopkins, Ernie Ross, Rob Morris, Martin Caton, Jim Sheraton, Martin Jones, Paul Tyler, Colin Channell, David Wright, Rudy Viz, Tony Worthington, Derek Watts, Julie Morgan, Reverend W. Martin Smythe, Diane Organ, Doug Henderson, Barry Gardner. There finishes the MPs. Now we start Brendan Barber, TUC General Secretary, Roger Lyons, TUC President and Amicus Joint General Secretary, David Prentice, Unison General Secretary, Tony Woodley, TGWU General Secretary, Billy Hayes, CWU General Secretary, Sir Bill Connor, General Secretary USDAW, Andy Gilchrist, FBU General Secretary, Gordon Taylor, Chief Executive PEFA, Adrian Askew, Connect, General Secretary. Bob Crow, RMT, General Secretary. Doug Nichols, CYWU, General Secretary. Ed Sweeney, UNIFI, General Secretary. Janice Goodrich, PCS President. Jeremy Deere, NUJ, General Secretary. Julie McKnight, NAPO, General Secretary. Kevin McCurran, GMB General Secretary. Mark Sirotka, PCS General Secretary. Paul Mackney, NATHFHE General Secretary. Peter Pendle, ACM General Secretary. Rosie Eagleson, AMO General Secretary. Steve Kemp, NUM General Secretary. Sally Hunt, AUT General Secretary. Glenys Kinnock, MEP. Gary Titler, MEP. Linda McAvan, MEP. Glyn Ford, MEP. Chris Heaton-Harris, MEP. Claude Moraes, MEP. Philip Whitehead, MAP. Stephen Hughes, MEP. David Seymour, Political Editor, Daily Mirror. Mark Seddon, Tribune Editor. Afzal Khan, Northwest Representative of Muslim Council of Britain. Dr. Richard Stone, Laurie and Ruby Nerva. Payol Zion, Kashmir Singh, General Secretary, British Sikh Federation. Benjamin Zephaniah, Poet. Beresford Mack, Choices FM. Bobby Miles, the 1990 Trust and Assistant Director. Carolyn Jones, Director, Institute of Employment Rights. Clive Mardner, Director, Essex REC. Dr. Siddiqui, Muslim Parliament. George Anthony, Maggie Bowden, Liberation. Hilary Wainwright, Editor, Red Pepper. John Haylett, Editor, Morning Star. Leroy Logan, Metropolitan Black Police Association Chair. Louise Christian, ironically a human rights lawyer. Louise Hutchins, NUS and SAAR. Luciana Berger, NUS. Paul Foote, journalist. Mark Steele, journalist. Ronnie Size, musician. Michael Rosen, writer. Laurie Helsden, Acting Regional Secretary, SERTUC. Essex Racial Equality Council. Liberal Democrats Northwest Region, Mohammed Azam. Coalition Against Racism, Unite to Stop the BNP. Jason Fraser, photojournalist. Now I'm out of breath and banjaxed, looking at how this second-rate but highly diversity and union-orientated thing came into being. It was, of course, in 2003 when the British National Party was going great guns and had the establishment on the run. Our government was then, of course, Labour, and still ensuring massive immigration came to pass to obliterate the indigenous votes in certain areas under threat from the nationalist vote. I know that for every positive action there is a negative one, but the formation of this gaggle of misfits, all with differing ideals, was a marriage made in hell for any country hoping to re-engage the patriot in us all. The UAF are financed by big business, unions, government and newspapers. The UAF, SWP, Socialist Workers' Party, have a large and shadowy network of bank accounts and front companies. Their primary paid role is to smash any British workers-based resistance to globalisation and multiculturalism. As a bonus, they bring the Zionist-contrived clash of civilisations to the streets of Britain. When you listen to the number of union guys and Muslims heading the Bad Bunch, and the fact that Doreen Lawrence, the saint in St. Steve's mother, is honorary president of the UAF, then nothing surprises me anymore. She will attach herself to any anti-white hate group. Wayman Bennett, who is as black as the Ace of Hearts and twice as ugly, is a violent Marxist and nicknamed the Missing Link. Many of the so-called elite are squatting anarchists or worse. My only dealings have been when attending conferences, sometimes local meetings and demonstrations with the British National Party. And then the gaggle of usually awful, scraggly and badly dressed unwashed, all yelling at the same time and waving banners, only just slightly better written than our most illiterate guys, and pointing fingers, yes fingers, like the school playground, I kid you not. My finger is more pointy than your finger. Oh yes, infinitely more pointy, matey. You can see the one thing I can never understand is that in a country like the UK, which prides itself, or used to, on freedom of speech, and indeed gives this freedom of speech away to foreigners with wild abandon and a sense of really helping out our ethnic brothers, denies this very freedom of speech to the mostly indigenous amongst us, nationalists or not. Now you see what my problem is. Not the fact that at some time in the early part of this century a Labour government thought that being patriotic was intruding on its plans for this country, and it decided to get together with a load of Muslims and other ethnics, strangers to our land, unions and big business, and of course various so-called charities, all of which do not benefit the white man in the street, and form a band of people who would fight for the victims of patriotism and the hard-done-by ethnics. All of which was unnecessary, as if things were that bad over here, they wouldn't continue to come over, would they, dimwits? But of course, being blessed with certain people in the nationalist parties who felt afraid that their members would come under fire locally, decided in their wisdom to cut down and in some cases cut out meeting places, as the threats to the owners of such were often dire and very nasty. This should have had the effect of firing up anybody with a patriotic bone in their body. After all, just how much damage could a handful of students or retards do? Well, of course, it wasn't just the retards. It was the plods who caused the most damage, and intentionally so. So we and other patriotic parties had the problems of announcing meetings in secrecy, which was hilarious, as we obviously had moles all over the place for years, and details always sneaked out. Then they had to be changed, and then the Reds, as we called them, couldn't get enough people together anyway to turn out. All in all, counterproductive all the way around, but very clever. Get people frightened, which is the communist way far more than us fascists, and the job is done for you. It was seen that the UK is ripe for picking for these plonkers, as the Brits seem to have lost their backbone along with their respect and loyalty to their own country, bless them. So now we have a very heavy Islamic influence throughout this country in our governments, councils, businesses, landowning and residential lettings, social services, education and of course the police. So you might be right in thinking that, apart from converting the heathen, Islam is spreading tentacles into the very heart of the structures of the countries they decide to enter and colonise. And you would be right. Many groups, charities, benevolent funds and aids to youngsters are primarily set up for Muslims and ethnics owing to the human rights, or which we, or rather our governments at the time, decided to incorporate into our laws. These cover-ups for funding of terrorism, conversion and diversity get much more help than, say, help for heroes or our elderly, or indeed our own white youth in need of help or advice. Thus, it would only happen in the UK that a mother of a murdered black guy who operated on the fringe of drugs could be feted and given one of the highest positions in the land in which she was not born or educated for, and I'm not talking about the UAF. Even the man in the street is now questioning the rate of colonisation in this country and is of course voting UKIP because he ain't too bright. But the main thing is to keep out Labour in the next election. Vote for anyone other than them, because you will find if you don't, all this will be coming to a house or school or a shop near you. Islam, or rather ISIS, has made a big mistake in killing that pilot. Firstly, he was a Muslim, and although they have been killing other Muslims and Christians willy-nilly without a quiver from the UN, this young man came from a good family in Yemen. Never once to take things sitting down, their king, the half-English Abdullah, has sworn vengeance on ISIS. This is good, but one must remember that we and the US supported ISIS in the beginning of the Arab Spring as being democratic, which is a name we in the Western world give to anyone who gets together and causes a fuss in a public place. So we should go in and wipe them off the face of Iraq and Syria, which is what poor old Assad has been trying to do for the last 3 years, whilst the Western media has been showing pictures of dying kids who've been blown up by the so-called Democrats. Talk about turnabout face plus egg all over the place, and it shows. My heart goes out to Moses' family for his terrible death, but ISIS had perfected this method with the Yazidis and no one moved a muscle in protest. There are still Yazidi girls in captivity undergoing a life I certainly wouldn't want for my daughter. The one thing that has united Islam in various acts of cruelty is the fact most have been perpetrated against Christians, Jews or non-Muslims. This sole act with a pilot has torn a hole in the dangerous fabric which any right-thinking man, Christian, Muslim, Jewish or other, will have to think long and hard about. So while the UAF and other like groups are banded together against the indigenous peoples of this land, and the Marxist media are happily implementing the plan, and patriotism is a nasty word to be laughed at or ignored, and the average Brit doesn't like posh or people who can speak English as their mother tongue, and we're all supposed to be happy to shift over on our small island to accommodate the unhappy of the rest of the world, Islam is taking over like an oil slick in Brixton. Now, whether you're liberal or anti-racist or whatever label you like to put on yourself to justify your thoughts, would you want a burning like this to happen in your country against one of your own people? And finally, 2 for 1 Day Friday. A husband is sitting on his recliner in the living room watching a basketball game when his wife interrupts. "Baby, could you fix the light in the bathroom? It's been flickering for weeks now." He looks at her with a not so happy face and says, "Fix the light now? Does it look like I have GE logo printed on my forehead? I do not think so." "Well, honey, then could you fix the refrigerator door? It doesn't close right." To which he replied, "Fix the fridge door? Does it look like I have Kenmore across my forehead? I don't think so." "Well, fine," she says, "then you could at least fix the steps by the porch. They're about to break." "I'm not a carpenter and I don't want to fix the steps," said the husband. "Does it look like I have Home Depot written on my forehead? I don't think so. I've had enough of you. I'm going to the sports bar down the road." So he goes down to the bar and drinks for a couple of hours. He starts to feel a bit guilty about how he treated his wife and decides to go home and help out. As he walks into the house, he notices the steps are already fixed. As he enters the house, he sees the bathroom light is working. As he goes to get a drink, he notices the fridge door is also fixed. "Honey, how'd you get all this fixed?" She said, "When you left, I sat outside and cried. Then a nice attractive young man asked me what was wrong and I told him. He offered to do all the repairs and all I had to do was either sleep with him or bake a cake." He said, "So what kind of cake did you bake him?" She replied, "Well, honey, do you see Betty Crocker written on my forehead?" Yeah, I love that one. And the devil made me do it. With all the hype about drinking and driving, I had a few beers, followed by several glasses of wine. Despite my jolliness, I still had the sense to know that I was over the limit. That's when I decided to do what I have never done before. I took a bus home. Sure enough, there was a police roadblock on the road home, but since it was a bus, they waved it past. I arrived home safely without incident. This was both a great relief and a surprise, because I'd never driven a bus before. I don't even know where I got it from, and now I don't know what to do with it. You've been listening to The World at 8. I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. If not always, Muslims. Another point to remember is that it was the BNP 10 years ago that blew the whistle, not the local councillors, the police or the then incumbent government. National fascists and racists told the truth. Tilal Mahdi guilty on 5 charges of sexually exploiting girls in Oxford. A 36-year-old man was found guilty of 5 charges and not guilty of 3 of allegations he sexually exploited teenage girls in Oxford. Tilal Mahdi of Friar Street, Hereford, denied committing sexual offences against 3 girls. In relation to one girl, he was found not guilty of a serious sexual assault, but was found guilty of conspiracy to rape and conspiracy to indecently assault a woman under 16, all from June the 5th, 1996 and June the 4th, 1998. For another girl, he was found guilty of conspiracy to rape, trafficking within the United Kingdom for sexual exploitation, arranging or facilitating child prostitution, and was found not guilty of rape, all from July 17, 2005 to July 16, 2008. Complaints Commission would not confirm that it had received an allegation of sexual abuse by a police constable, but said that so far there had been 20 complaints against 10 South Yorkshire officers in relation to their handling of the child sexual exploitation investigation in the South Yorkshire town. The inquiry also endorsed the findings of a previous investigation carried out last year by an expert in child care, Professor Alexis J, and criticised councils for rejecting it. That report made headlines around the world after finding that girls had been beaten by groups of men in Rotherham and in some cases forced to witness the rape of other victims. She wrote, in just over a third of cases, children affected by sexual exploitation were previously known to services because of child protection and neglect. Girls as young as 11 were raped by large numbers of male perpetrators. Most of the men involved were of Pakistani origin. World at 8. Old news and sold news. Now every Tom, Dick and Harry is claiming ignorance of these rapists, and frankly Rotherham is the fag end of it all. It's been common knowledge around Liverpool for the last 40 years, and also common knowledge that the perpetrators are mostly. He was found not guilty of raping another girl on March the 24th, 2006 at the hearing at Oxford Crown Court. He will return to the court for sentencing on March the 6th. World at 8. Deportation for him and his family now. 25 men charged with sexual offences against 2 girls in Calderdale. 25 men have been charged with child sex offences in Calderdale following a major police operation. The men, mainly from Halifax, have been charged with various offences including rape, trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation, sexual activity with a child under 16, sexual assault, voyeurism, sexual grooming, conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with a child under 16, causing a child under 16 to engage in sexual activity without consent, and supply of a Class B drug. The allegations, which date between 2006 and 2011, relate in the main to one girl who was aged under 16 at the time. However, one of the allegations relates to a second victim and occurred in the same time period. All 25 men were charged at Halifax Police Station.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number 1 in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 6th of February 2015. Thought for the day: the UAF, Islam and the future. Rotherham Council branded not fit for purpose. Tilal Mahdi guilty on 5 charges of sexually exploiting girls in Oxford. 25 men charged with sexual offences against 2 girls in Calderdale. Ukraine crisis: Angela Merkel and François Hollande fly to Russia. Anti-Islam group Pegida is part of Germany, Vice-Chancellor says. Jordan's jets strike Islamic State after pilot's death. Al-Qaeda members' testimony implicating Saudis fuels calls to declassify 9/11 documents. Chad kills 200 Boko Haram militants in Nigeria. Boko Haram, hit by 3-nation offensive, turns fury on Cameroonian civilians. And finally, 2 for 1 day Friday. UK news: Rotherham Council branded not fit for purpose. Rotherham Council's cabinet is to resign after being branded not fit for purpose and in denial about its shortcomings by an independent government inspection. They will leave their posts as soon as transitional arrangements can be put in place, according to a statement. The political leadership, branded wholly dysfunctional by Communities Secretary Eric Pickles, will be replaced by government commissioners who will be tasked with improving standards at the authority. Early elections will also be held. The inquiry was set up to assess Rotherham's council's ability to handle revelations that 1,400 girls were subjected to sexual abuse over a period of 16 years. It found that, in particular, it is failing in its duties to protect vulnerable children and young people from harm. Louise Casey's report was published as it was claimed a police officer and 2 local politicians have been accused of having sex with underage girls in Rotherham. The Independent Police